Tonight, we dive into the ancient legend of Arion, the overlooked son of Hephaestus, a demigod forged not in the golden halls of Olympus, but in the molten heart of a mortal smithy. His mission? To steal the sacred flame from the god's stronghold atop Mount Olympus and rekindle the fading hearths of a freezing world. But his path was no mere hero's journey. A monstrous three-headed beast from the underworld, a swift-footed deity consumed by envy, and a storm-weaving seer who prophesied only Arion's doom stood in his way. So, before you settle in, take a second to like this video and subscribe if you're drawn to tales that weave myth and mystery. Drop a comment to tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Our stories might keep you up past bedtime or spark dreams that burn brighter than ever. Now, dim the lights, maybe light a candle for ambiance, and let's unravel tonight's tale together. In the shadow of Mount Mycale, where the air hummed with the clang of a hammer on an anvil, there lived a woman whose craft rivaled the divine. Her name was Thalassa, a blacksmith whose calloused hands shaped iron with a precision that seemed to defy mortal limits. Her blades could cleave through bronze like butter, and her armor was said to have shielded warriors in battles that turned tides across the Aegean. Legends whispered that Athena herself had once donned Thalassa's greaves during a forgotten war. The gods took notice, but only one dared to step into her world. Hephaestus, the scarred god of fire and forge, the outcast of Olympus, watched her from the edges of twilight. He wasn't swayed by fleeting beauty. Thalassa was no delicate muse draped in silks. Her face was streaked with ash, her arms bore the scars of molten sparks, and her scent was of charred oak and molten steel. Yet when she worked, Hephaestus saw a spark of the divine in her relentless rhythm, a mirror of his own unyielding craft.
One starless night, as embers glowed like constellations in her forge, Hephaestus appeared, his form shrouded in smoke and the faint glow of molten bronze. He offered no treasures or promises, only his quiet presence, a god humbled by a mortal's fire. That night, the forge roared with a life of its own, flames dancing higher than ever before. 9 months later, a child was born, Arion. He did not wail as newborns do. His eyes, bright as smoldering coals, opened to meet the world, and the forge's flames surged as if greeting an old friend. The midwives stood frozen. One murmured, "He's kissed by the gods." Another clutched her amulet, whispering of omens. The eldest, her voice trembling, said, "This boy is not long for our world." Arion grew swiftly, his strength unnatural. By age 6, he molded iron with ease. By 8, he crafted a dagger so sharp it sang through the air, its blade inexplicably warm to the touch. He didn't chase games or laughter like other children. His silence unnerved the village. They called him flame-touched, a child of a god who sat no Olympian throne. The priests shunned him, refusing their blessings. The townsfolk whispered of curses. But Thalassa, fierce as the fire she tamed, loved him with a ferocity that rivaled any god's wrath. She taught him not just to shape metal, but to understand its soul. Fire listens to those who honor it, not those who demand its power.
By 16, Arion's forge burned ceaselessly. crafting weapons for distant wars and rulers he'd never known. Yet within him stirred a purpose greater than iron. He was not born to toil in obscurity. He was destined to reshape the fate of humanity itself. Long ago, the eternal flame was no mere gift, it was a rebellion. Stolen from the heavens by Prometheus, it was the spark that birthed civilization, fueling not just warmth, but invention, poetry, and philosophy. It was the fire that made mortals dream beyond their clay. But that age of defiance had waned. Humanity had grown careless, forgetting the price Prometheus paid in chains. The gods, in their towering arrogance, turned away from the world they once nurtured. It began subtly. Hearths that once burned bright began to sputter. Winters grew harsher, biting through even the thickest walls. Storms raged through summers, drowning fields before they could bloom. Families huddled beside cold grates, their prayers unanswered by ash. Sages pointed to shifting constellations. Priests preached of divine retribution, but a deeper fear spread like frost across the world. Not that the end was near, but that the gods had forsaken them entirely. Atop Mount Olympus, the gods had locked away the last true flame in a celestial brazier, its light untouchable by mortal hands for centuries. They guarded it jealously, fearing another Prometheus, another spark of rebellion. "Let them freeze," Zeus declared in council, his voice like thunder. "Mortals must kneel to remember their place." But not all gods consented. In secret groves and hidden springs, murmurs of dissent grew. Dryads whispered of a boy born of fire in Mycale. Nereids spoke of embers dancing in a young smith's gaze. The winds carried a name, Arion. In the shadowed halls of Delphi, an oracle stirred from her visions, her dreams alight with flames that could either save or consume the world.
Across the earth, signs of awakening flickered. Cities glowed faintly, as if touched by unseen sparks, their streets humming with the echo of a distant hammer striking anvil. In abandoned shrines, candles long extinguished flared briefly to life, their wicks answering the rhythm of a blacksmith's craft. Irion, unaware, toiled in his forge in Mycale, wrestling with iron that grew stubborn under his hands. The flames he'd once coaxed with ease now demanded relentless effort, their warmth fading like a memory. Yet the world had begun to notice him. Gods, silent for centuries, turned their ancient eyes toward the mortal smithy. High on Olympus, the celestial brazier, encased in alabaster and guarded by divine decree, quivered for the first time in eons, its light swaying not for a god, but for a boy born of fire and sacrifice. Deep within Irion, a spark kindled, a quiet glow that pulsed with purpose he could not yet name. Delphi, once the beating heart of divine prophecy, where pilgrims braved treacherous paths to hear Apollo's whispered truths, now lay in ruin. Its marble columns stood fractured, cloaked in moss, and its sacred springs had dwindled to mere vapor. Yet one voice endured, hidden in the mountain's core.
Irion arrived at dawn, his footsteps silent on the cracked stone path. No priests greeted him. The temple's torches had long since surrendered to darkness. Vines wove through shattered altars like the grasp of a fading faith. Above, thunder rumbled, not of storm, but of something ancient and watchful, stirring in the heavens. He descended into the temple's heart, a cavern where kings had once knelt and wept for guidance. There, on a throne of weathered granite, sat the oracle. Her robes, the color of twilight, draped over her like a shroud. Her skin was pale as bone, her blind eyes alight with the churn of tempests. Before Arion could speak, she drew a sharp breath, as if pulling a spark from the air. "Arion," she rasped, though he had not offered his name. He stood still, unyielding. "You will scale the peak of Olympus. You will seize the sacred flame, and you will perish." Her words cut through the silence like a blade, not a prophecy, but a verdict. Arion met her gaze, unshaken. He knew oracles wove truths in riddles, their words veiled in mystery. But this was no enigma. It was a warning carved in stone. The oracle rose, her movements fluid as smoke curling through a gale. "The gods will defy you. The earth will crave your defeat. The flame you seek is not mortal. It was stolen once, and its thief paid with eternal torment." Arion stepped closer, his voice steady as iron. "Then I'll bear the cost." Silence stretched between them, heavy as a storm's pause. Then came her laughter, worn, not mocking, the sound of one who had witnessed too many fates converge. "You already do," she murmured. The chamber darkened. Thunder roared, shaking the earth. The air thrummed with primal power, then fell still. Arion left without a word, but her prophecy clung to him, woven into the flames of his forge, the shadows of his dreams, and the weight of every step he took. The gods had spoken. His destiny was sealed. Yet even Olympus could not foresee what a world starved of light might do when its fire was returned. To climb Olympus was to earn its respect, for the mountain bowed to no untested soul. Myths told of its roots, not of earth or ice, but of spirit, a threshold guarded by a gate of silence, and the oldest terror known to creation, Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades. No mortal could pass without brushing against death itself. Arion did not hesitate. He had studied legends as a smith studies flame, intimately, cautiously. He knew what lurked beneath the mountain's foundation. To reach the sacred flame, he must first descend, not in metaphor, but into the underworld's depths. He prepared not with weapons, but with craft. For 3 days and nights he labored in his forge, shaping a collar, not for war, but for reverence. Forged from obsidian, tempered iron, and the last glowing ember from Talassa's hearth, it gleamed with quiet power. Into its surface he etched 3 names, one for each of Cerberus's heads: remembrance, devotion, sorrow. He spoke to them softly as he worked, his voice blending with the forge's song.
On the fourth dawn, he stood before a cavern at the base of Olympus, its mouth yawning into endless shadow. The air was frigid, not biting the flesh, but chilling the spirit, heavy with the scent of unanswered prayers. Arion stepped forward, passing bones that shimmered faintly in the dark and torches that flared without fire. Deeper he went, until he heard it, a low, resonant breathing, vast and threefold, like tempests slumbering in harmony. Cerberus awaited. Arion stepped into a cavernous hollow, where the air was thick with the scent of ash and ancient bone. There lay Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld, slumbering on a bed of cinders and skeletal remains. Each head moved to its own rhythm, one twitching, another stirring, the third faintly growling in its dreams. Its fur was darker than the void itself, swallowing light itself. Though its eyes were shut, its ears flicked at the sound of Arion's approach. He carried no blade, no shield. Instead, he knelt before the beast, holding the obsidian collar he had forged. Softly, he began to sing, a lullaby Thalassa had woven into his childhood, its melody a shield against the world's vast cruelty. The central head lifted, its amber eyes glinting. The left head rumbled, then stilled. The right opened a single eye, watching. In that fragile silence, Arion fastened the collar around Cerberus's neck. The beast exhaled, a gust of warm, ancient breath, and the unseen gate behind it parted, not with defiance, but with reverence. Arion had faced death, and death had yielded. The path up Olympus was no path at all. No signs marked the way, no constellations offered guidance, only relentless stone, biting gales, and murmurs that seemed to rise from the mountain's core. Arion climbed with instinct, not certainty. His mortal hands tore against jagged rock, his divine blood simmering in his veins. The mountain resisted, its slopes shifting as if to cast him off. Then, without fanfare, a figure appeared, not with thunder or radiance, but with the quiet of a shadow slipping into place. Hermes, the fleet-footed trickster, god of thieves and messengers, stood on a narrow outcrop. His traveler's cloak fluttered, his winged sandals gleamed faintly, and his eyes cut like polished obsidian. A sly smile curled his lips as he tossed a silver coin, catching it mid-air.
"Well," he said, voice light as a breeze, "I expected someone grander." Arion pressed upward, undeterred. Hermes drifted alongside, his steps weightless. "You think you can restore fire to a world that's forgotten how to tend it? Bold, noble, foolish." Arion paused, meeting his gaze. "Then stop me." Hermes' laugh was sharp, like a blade grazing stone. "Fight you? No, no. I'm here to make you see. You're storming the gods' sanctuary, chasing a flame that doesn't belong to you, writing a story you weren't meant to tell." Arion's voice was steady. "Yet here I stand." Hermes' grin faltered.
"You're trying to mend what was broken for a purpose," he said, his tone darkening. "The flame was a gift once, a mistake. Now the gods guard it like a serpent hoards its treasure, not for its value, but for its danger." Arion held his stare. "Then they have forgotten what danger truly is." Hermes' expression hardened, the air growing taut. The coin vanished from his hand, his wings quivering faintly. "You think you're Prometheus reborn, but you're barely a spark next to him. I'm not Prometheus. I'm finishing what he began." Hermes stepped closer, pressing 2 fingers to Arion's chest. A searing pain bloomed, not of flesh, but of soul, a twisting thread of doubt and fire. "The flame you seek will consume all that you are." Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his words. The mountain shuddered.
A storm gathered, not of water, but of fate. Arion climbed on, cursed but unbroken. Hermes' curse settled into Arion like embers buried in snow, a subtle ache at first, a tightening in his chest with every breath. But as he ascended, it grew, gnawing at him, not like a wound, but like time eroding stone. Piece by piece, it stripped away the mortal in him, leaving something raw and untamed. Olympus was no mere mountain, it was a living force. Its cliffs shifted underfoot as if testing his resolve. Winds howled through gorges, carrying voices of ancient fury, enraged by his audacity. The higher he climbed, the less the world resembled the one he knew. Trees gave way to barren stone, the songs of birds faded, even the stars seemed to retreat, as if unwilling to witness his defiance. Arion bled, his hands raw from gripping razor-sharp ledges. He stumbled, once nearly plummeting into the abyss, but a sudden surge of heat from within steadied him. A spark of the flame Hermes had warned would destroy him, now stirring to life. He pressed on, driven by visions of frost-bitten villages, hearths gone cold, and children shivering in the dark. He thought of Thalassa, her hands scarred from years of forging warmth for a world that had forgotten gratitude. Olympus offered no reprieve. Storm clouds coiled above, their edges crackling with lightning that danced like the gods themselves, restless and wrathful. Their gaze weighed on him, judging, waiting for his fall. But it wasn't just the mountain opposing him. It was Olympus itself, a divine will determined to break the boy who dared to steal its fire. Arion passed through the remnants of forgotten sanctuaries etched into the mountain's bones, temples eroded by time, their altars split, their gods reduced to whispers. Statues of Athena stared with hollow sockets, their wisdom chipped away. Pillars dedicated to Zeus lay fractured, silenced by centuries of neglect. As he climbed, a truth crystallized, one no mortal had dared voice. The gods were not invincible. They were terrified. Terrified that a mortal born far from their celestial halls might reclaim the fire they hoarded, wielding a light that once defined their reign. In their fear, they unleashed their fury,
ice that clawed at his skin, thunder that shook his bones, visions of despair and voices that hissed of failure. Yet Arion ascended, his hands bloodied, his heart alight with a smoldering resolve, piercing the veil of clouds. At the summit he glimpsed it, not bathed in sunlight, but glowing with divine radiance, the celestial brazier. The peak of Olympus was no gilded fortress, no divine court resounding with trumpets. It was a desolate expanse, silent save for the flame itself. The brazier, carved from stone older than myth, stood alone, its surface worn by hands lost to time. Within it burned the eternal flame, neither red nor gold, but a piercing white, alive with a presence that seemed to gaze back. Arion approached, and the heat did not burn him, it flowed into him as if reclaiming a fragment of itself. His breath hitched, his skin tingled. The curse Hermes had planted in his chest pulsed like a second heart, resonating with the flame like a long-lost kin. Arion reached for the flame, and time unraveled. Visions flooded his mind, cities illuminated by firelight, Talus's forge blazing through endless winters, civilizations rising from sparks and crumbling in their own hubris.
Each owed its existence to the flame, yet each forgot its sacred debt. He saw Prometheus, bound to a jagged rock, his body torn daily by an eagle's beak, a punishment the gods called justice, but Aserion recognized as fear cloaked in divine wrath. He could turn back, let the world shiver in darkness, let his name fade, but then a whisper carried on the wind, Thalassa's voice, soft yet unyielding, and he knew his purpose. He seized the flame. It consumed him, not with pain, but with transformation. His bones shuddered, reshaping. His skin glowed as if molten. His veins surged with radiant light. He collapsed, a silent scream tearing through him as the flame rewrote his essence, burning away the mortal boy and forging the fire-bearer. He was no longer grasping the flame. He had become its vessel. The brazier dimmed, its light extinguished, for the eternal flame had abandoned its ancient prison. Aserion lay beside the empty pedestal, smoke curling from his fingers, his eyes blazing like the dawn. Each breath he took sent tendrils of warmth spiraling outward, down the mountain toward a world starved of light. He had claimed the fire, not for himself, but for all. Aserion did not walk down Olympus, he carried its essence within him. The moment the flame merged with his soul, the mountain relented. Storms dissolved, the sky unveiled its stars, and the stone beneath his feet seemed to guide him, not with worship, but with acknowledgement. He was no longer an intruder, he was a beacon. His body radiated a gentle heat, not the kind that scorched, but the kind that kindled life. Where his footsteps fell, ice melted into rivulets. Each exhale softened the bitter winds, filling the air with the scent of renewal, of spring reborn. But he was not unscathed. His limbs trembled under the weight of his burden.
The eternal flame was more than fire. It was memory, carrying the weight of every spark it had ever birthed. The first flame in a primal cave, the torches that illuminated the Parthenon, the forges that armed empires. It also carried the scars, cities razed, temples exalted, wars waged in its name. The god's gift had never been pure, but Arion vowed it would not become a weapon again. He descended through mist and silence, past the broken effigies of gods once revered, now crumbling into dust. He passed the cavern where Cerberus had stood guard, but the hound was gone, as if even the underworld bowed to what he had become. When he reached the world below, he entered a village locked in frost, where hearths had long turned to ash. The people gathered not with fear, but with wonder, their faces lit by the glow of his presence. Arion did not speak. His light spoke for him. Arion extended his hand, and a spark leapt from his fingertips, igniting the nearest hearth. The flames surged, spreading from one home to another, then to villages and cities beyond, rekindling a warmth the world had forgotten. No prayers were needed, only presence. Arion burned, not with agony, but with transcendence. His hair shimmered like liquid sunlight, his skin fractured like tempered obsidian under a forge's heat. He was fading, yet not diminishing. He was becoming something greater. He had not stolen the flame, he had merged with it. Wherever its light touched, whispers of his name followed, not in reverence, but in quiet gratitude.
No monument marked Arion's passing. No temple sang his praises. No carvings bore his likeness. Yet he never vanished. After the fires returned, strange wonders stirred across the land. Hearths in remote hamlets flared without kindling. Forests locked in eternal frost bloomed with sudden life. Blacksmiths swore their forges roared hotter, needing less fuel. Children, shivering in the dark, spoke of a radiant figure standing by their hearths before the flames awoke. No proof existed, only stories, all echoing the same truth. Arion walked until his mortal form dissolved. His bones, blood, and breath became spark, ember, and warmth, given freely to the world. In Mycale, Thalas's forsaken forge, silent for decades, blazed one night. A lone traveler claimed to see a young man shaping a glowing white blade at the anvil. When he blinked, the forge stood empty, but its fire burned fierce and steady as it had in her time. The gods felt the shift. Olympus, stripped of its sacred flame, quaked in its silence. Yet no divine wrath descended. No thunderbolt struck. Even the immortals understood. Arion had not waged war or defied them with arrogance. He had rekindled their forgotten purpose. The eternal flame, once locked in their celestial vault, now danced in every village hearth, every wanderer's torch, every candle lit for the lost. It glowed in shared meals among strangers, in lanterns raised by poets in shadowed alleys, in fires that warmed rebels dreaming of freedom. And always his name lingered, Arion, whispered in awe. Some said a dimming flame meant he was near. Others claimed the crackle of a fire carried the steady rhythm of a hammer on anvil, unyielding, eternal. Arion had not died. He had become warmth itself. Not a god, not a hero,
but a boy who surrendered everything to teach the world how to shine again. In the rugged land of Sparta, where boys learned the spear before their letters and honor was forged in blood, women stood as fierce as their brothers. Among them rose Leonthe, daughter of Commander Adrastos, her name ringing through the city's stone corridors like the clash of bronze. Born beneath a blood-red eclipse, as wolves howled and omens stirred, the midwives whispered she was touched by Arion's fire.
By 12, she had thrown her brothers to the dust in the training pits. By 16, she led a hunt into the Taygetus Mountains, returning with the hides of 3 boars lashed to her chariot. Leonthe was not merely respected, she was a force. In the Spartan agora, her presence stilled voices. Men averted their gaze, women watched with a blend of admiration and unease. Her words were sparse, sharp as a blade's edge, each one chosen with a warrior's precision. Yet beneath her armor lay a secret few glimpsed. At night, when the torches dimmed and Sparta's clamor faded, Leonthe would shed her cuirass and gaze at the stars, not with a soldier's defiance, but with a quiet wonder. Hidden within her was a softness no battle could extinguish, a longing not for glory or conquest, but for something unnamed in Sparta's iron code. Perhaps it was peace, perhaps mystery, perhaps a spark of the divine. She never spoke of it. What she knew was this: every full moon, when the city slept and its warriors rested, an unseen force drew her to the cliffs above the Eurotas River.
Leaving behind her spear, her shield, and her legend, she wandered alone under the starlit sky, a woman seeking something beyond the clash of steel. Leonthe stood alone on the cliffs above the Eurotas, her gaze tracing the vastness of a sky that seemed to stretch beyond Sparta's rigid borders. The world, she sensed, was larger than the clash of spears or the weight of honor. It hummed with a melody she couldn't hear but felt in her veins, like a song woven into the stars. One night, under a sky so luminous it gleamed like polished bronze, she glimpsed it, a swan gliding across a tranquil pool in a secluded grove. Its form was serene, bathed in moonlight that danced across its feathers, radiant yet untamed, more beautiful than any warrior's glory. From that moment, Leonthe's path began to turn, not toward blood or conquest, but toward something gentler, stranger, and infinitely more perilous. The grove lay hidden between jagged cliffs, untouched by the march of Spartan sandals. It felt ancient, older than the city's stone walls, older even than the myths of Olympus. Silver-leafed trees arched like crescent moons, their branches bowing low as if in reverence. At the grove's heart lay a mirror-like lake, its surface unbroken, reflecting the heavens. There floated the swan, its feathers shimmering with a light that was neither white nor silver, but something ethereal, caught between worlds.
It moved with the grace of mist, leaving no ripple in its wake. Its neck curved like a sculptor's dream, and its eyes, God's, its eyes held no trace of animal instinct, only a quiet, knowing presence. Leonthe halted at the grove's edge, her warrior's instincts urging caution. Nothing in nature moved with such deliberate calm, unafraid of a human's approach. Yet the swan did not flinch. It regarded her with steady patience, as if it had been waiting. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her dagger, her pulse steady but vigilant. The swan glided toward her, slow and purposeful, halting at the water's edge. It dipped its head, a gesture almost ceremonial. Leonthe knelt, her breath catching. She had witnessed countless spectacles, battlefields aflame, warriors shouting defiance, foals stumbling into life, but none matched the quiet majesty of this moment, this enchantment.
She reached out, her fingers grazing the swan's feathers. They were warm, impossibly so, as if infused with the sun's own heat. A sensation stirred within her, not fear, not awe, but something ancient, a connection she hadn't known she craved until it bloomed in her chest. The swan blinked once, then turned, gliding back to the lake's center. Leonthe remained, rooted to the shore, uncertain of what had begun, but certain it was no coincidence. Each full moon, Leonthe returned to the grove, and the swan was always there, waiting. No words passed between them, only a silent bond, a ritual forged in quiet gravity. Seasons shifted, leaves greened, withered and sprouted anew, while wars raged in the valleys below. But in the grove, time seemed to pause, held captive by those moonlit nights. Leonthe, once defined by her scars and victories, now followed a softer call, one older than Sparta's unyielding code. She brought offerings, ripe figs, woven cloths, carvings of olive wood smoothed by her own hands. The swan never touched them, yet she persisted, driven by an instinct she couldn't name.
The swan greeted her each time, gliding to the shore, bowing its head as if in recognition. Sometimes it circled her, its warmth radiating like a hidden dawn. Other times it stood beside her, its feathers brushing her arm, sharing the silence. Leonthe began to speak, not as a warrior trained to command, but as a woman unburdening her soul. She spoke of her father's distant gaze, the hollow ache that no triumph could fill, the nights she searched the stars for a purpose beyond steel and duty. The swan offered no reply, but its stillness was alive with listening, a presence no Spartan elder, comrade, or lover had ever given her. Over time, solitude lost its weight. Before each visit, Leonthe wove her hair with care, smoothed her robes, and sat beside the swan for hours, her shoulder grazing its wing, her words few but heavy with meaning. The swan never wavered, never aged, its warmth an unwavering constant. She should have feared it, a creature so unnatural, so unbound by the laws of the wild, but fear gave way to trust, and trust to something deeper. The grove had become her sanctuary, the swan her silent guide, and Leonthe, the fiercest of Sparta's daughters, was no longer the same.
Leonthe no longer trusted tales of gods cloaked in animal forms, luring mortals to their doom, or of punishments for those who dared love the divine. She trusted instead in the warmth of the swan's neck beneath her hand, the way it lowered its head when she sang softly into the night, its presence steady and unwavering, as if it needed her as much as she needed it. No vows were spoken, no promises made, but in their shared silence something ancient took root. Though she dared not name it aloud, not even in the quiet of her own heart, Leonthe knew it was love. The swan was no creature of the earth. Its wings had once spanned the heavens. Its hands had strung the lyre that woke the dawn. Its name had echoed in sacred hymns in chiseled stone. Apollo, god of light, music, and prophecy, now bound in feathers, voiceless and diminished. Long before Leonthe's birth, he had defied Zeus, not with rebellion or steel, but with truth. He spoke against his father's decrees, the cruelties handed down from Olympus, the silence imposed by divine might. Zeus, in his wrath, did not slay him, but unraveled him. A curse, more punishment than justice, stripped Apollo of his radiance, forcing his divinity into the form of a swan, not to humble him, but to prove that even a god who shone like the sun could be caged by shadow. The curse bore a crueler twist. If a mortal ever learned his true name, the transformation would bind him forever. So Apollo drifted through centuries, gliding on forgotten lakes, hiding beneath starlight, watching his temples crumble and his songs fade as the gods retreated from a cooling world, until Leonthe. Her presence stirred something long buried, a spark even Olympus could not extinguish, hope. He had not meant to linger, nor to be seen, yet she returned, moon after moon, her voice weaving through the grove like a melody that rekindled the fire within him. She was no priestess, no nymph, no chosen seer, just a warrior forged in Sparta's unyielding fires, trained to feel nothing but duty. Yet she saw him not as a symbol or a threat, but as something sacred, worth returning for.
He could not speak, could not reveal his truth, but in the tilt of his neck, the stillness of his gaze, he answered her unspoken questions. And slowly, impossibly, he loved her in return. In Sparta, solitude was a virtue, but only in measure. Leonthe's absences did not go unnoticed. Each full moon she slipped away from the barracks, past the training grounds, beyond the watchful gazes of her comrades and kin. At first none questioned her. She was Leonthe, unbreakable, the warrior whose loyalty was etched in every scar. But Sparta was a city of order, where discipline reigned, and love, especially a secret love, was an alien force in a world built on control. Whispers spread like embers. She wanders alone. Her voice grows quiet in council. Her strikes lack their old ferocity. It was true. Leonthe had changed. Her movements remained precise, but they no longer carried cruelty. Her words softened, and her eyes held a warmth that seemed to cradle a hidden truth. Some nights she smiled as if guarding a secret the gods themselves could not claim.
Her father, Commander Adrostos, was the first to see it. A man whose face knew no tenderness. He had raised daughters to command armies, not to chase fleeting emotions. One evening, under the pretense of discussing tactics, he called her to his chamber. When the room cleared, his voice was blunt. "What pulls you from your duty?" Leonthe offered no reply, her silence a shield. His tone hardened. "Do not forget what Sparta demands of you." But Leonthe had already begun to shed the self Sparta had forged. What the city had carved in stone, the swan had softened with starlight, and she found herself unwilling to return to the warrior she had been. Yet Sparta's eyes were relentless. A patrol once trailed her beyond the city walls, following her path toward the cliffs above the Eurotas. They lost her among the olive groves, her skill outmatching their pursuit. But it was enough to kindle doubt. Priests spoke of unsettling omens, moonlight carrying whispers, lakes stirring without wind, a warrior vanishing under each full moon's glow. Suspicion took root, and Sparta began to close in on Leonthe's secret.
Leonthe felt the walls of Sparta closing in. The city's watchful eyes, once averted in respect, now lingered on her, probing her silence. What had been her strength, a warrior's quiet resolve, now marked her as vulnerable. Yet she could not stay away. Each full moon she returned to the grove, where moonlight caressed the swan's feathers, and the clamor of Sparta faded. Duty, rules, danger, all dissolved in the presence of the swan. Only one fear remained, that the world would discover the truth she held in her heart, a truth that could shatter them both. That night, the moon hung low, its golden glow heavy like a flame on the verge of fading. In her chamber, Leonthe's hands faltered over her armor, unable to secure the final clasp. A tremor had haunted her for days, a subtle pulse beneath the earth, as if it sensed what she could not. At their last meeting, the swan had been restless, its feathers ruffled by an unseen breeze, its warmth sharp rather than soothing.
It had circled her twice before settling, its gaze more vigilant than tender. Sleep evaded her that night, and when it came, it brought dreams. She stood in a grove bathed in silver, her hands dusted with gold. Before her rose a statue, half man, half swan, its wings caught mid-flight, its face serene yet lifeless. She reached out, whispering a name she hadn't known she knew, Apollo. A voice echoed, not from the heavens, but from within her bones. Truth will bind what love has freed. She woke, gasping, the name searing her tongue, her heart pounding with the weight of prophecy. The next day, Leonthe left Sparta at dawn, her steps unsteady, drawn not by habit, but by an ache she couldn't name. She avoided her usual path, her feet guiding her deeper into the hills, through uncharted groves where shadows clung to ancient trees. There, Veiled by ivy and moss, she found it. An altar, weathered by time, its surface etched with a single inscription in flaking gold: Apollon. Her breath caught, the pieces falling into place like shards of a broken blade.
The swan's warmth, its knowing gaze, the dreams, the pull of the full moon. It was no mere creature. It was a god, her god. And in knowing him, she had undone something sacred. She staggered back, the rustle of feathers behind her. The swan had followed, silent as ever, but its presence no longer brought peace. It stood, watching, its eyes heavy with sorrow, as if it had always known this moment would come. The grove pulsed with a slow, deep rhythm, like the breath of a slumbering titan. Moonlight quivered on the lake's surface, and the trees leaned closer, bearing witness to a secret unraveling after centuries. Leonthe faced the altar, the name Apollo echoing in her mind like a spear striking stone. She turned, her heart a storm, and met the swan's gaze. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. The air stilled. A single feather fell from the swan's back, drifting slowly before dissolving into golden dust as it touched the altar. Then the transformation began. The swan's neck arched, not in grace, but in torment. Its body shuddered, feathers melting into streams of light and gold. Wings twisted into arms, webbed feet reshaped into human toes that gripped the earth. Where the swan had stood, a man now knelt, radiant, broken, Apollo. His hair gleamed like the dawn, his skin glowed faintly like embers beneath alabaster, but his eyes, dimmed by grief, carried the weight of inevitability. Leonthe stepped back, her hand rising to her lips. She had loved him in silence, but now silence was a wound. He tried to speak, his voice fracturing like lightning in an ancient storm. "You were never meant to know," he said at last, his words barely louder than the wind. "It was the only rule." She sank to her knees beside him, tears carving paths down her warrior's face like rivers etching through unyielding stone. "I didn't mean to," Leonthe whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of her discovery. Apollo's lips curved, a fleeting smile, not of joy, but of a god's farewell. "I know," he murmured. The earth trembled beneath them, a silent quake, a divine verdict delivered without mercy. Apollo's radiance began to fade. His skin, once aglow with divine warmth, hardened into cold marble. His golden hair dulled, its strands solidifying like threads of stone. Zeus's curse, patient and merciless, claimed its final toll. Leonthe clutched his hands, still faintly warm, trembling with the last echoes of life. She felt the stone creeping over them like frost sealing a river. His fingers laced with hers one last time before they stilled forever. "No!" she pleaded, shaking her head. "This can't be the end!" But the curse was deaf to her cries. Apollo's chest rose once, then fell silent. His half-formed wings, caught mid-unfurling, froze in eternal yearning. His face, still radiant with love and sorrow,
locked into an expression of quiet agony. His eyes, open but unseeing, gazed into a void where light no longer dwelled. Silence descended, heavier than any battlefield's pause, deeper than the hush before a charge. This was not peace, it was loss, the shattering of something sacred. Leothe knelt, her forehead pressed against his now cold hand, a hand that had once cradled the dawn. Her tears traced paths down his marble fingers, falling to the earth like offerings in a silent requiem.
The grove dimmed, the moonlight retreating behind a shroud of clouds. No thunder roared, no gods descended. The punishment was complete. Zeus had spoken, and Apollo, god of light and song, was now a statue, forever bound in the moment of his truth's revelation. Leonthe remained, her arms wrapped around the stone that had been her love, her tears the only sound in a world that had grown too still. Leonthe never returned to Sparta. She shed her armor beside the ancient altar, unbuckled her sword, and let her warrior's name dissolve into the mist rising from the lake. The woman who had once stood unyielding among commanders now knelt in the grove, her world reduced to a statue and a memory. Each full moon she returned without fail, not with offerings or prayers, but with her presence. She sat beside Apollo's marble form, her fingers brushing the stone hand she had once held in life. Sometimes she spoke of the stars, the battles she no longer fought, or the ache of a world that felt too small.
Other times she hummed a melody, soft and unformed, as if it belonged to both of them. Often she simply sat in silence, watching the lake's still surface reflect a sky that no longer held answers. Whispers spread among the villagers. They spoke of a woman haunting the hills, her eyes like distant constellations, wandering under the moon's glow. Some called her mad, others chosen, but none dared approach her. Years turned to decades. Winters carved lines into the earth. Empires rose and fell, and the gods grew silent, their names fading from mortal tongues. Yet Leonthe endured, not as a warrior, but as a sentinel, her strength rooted like an olive tree, unyielding through storm and time. Apollo's statue stood unchanged, mid-kneel, wings half-formed, his gaze fixed on the spot where Leonthe always rested, a moment captured in stone, untouched by decay. Travelers whispered of miracles. The statue's marble, warm to the touch, pulsed faintly like a heartbeat from a forgotten dream. Some swore they felt it stir beneath their hands, a flicker of the god who had once been.
On one final full moon, Leonthe came to the grove. She lingered longer than ever, her head resting gently against Apollo's stone shoulder, her breath slow and steady. She did not rise again. Weeks later, villagers found her there, serene, her eyes closed, a faint smile curving her lips as if she had found peace at last. Beside her, Apollo's statue glowed faintly, as if lit from within by a light no mortal could name. None dared touch it.
The grove became sacred, a place where love had defied a god's wrath, where a warrior had chosen a truth greater than Sparta's steel. They erected no shrine, no altar, yet the tale spread like whispers on the wind, and even now, when the moon swells full and the breeze falls silent, some claim the swan glides back to the lake, not to reveal itself, but to linger in memory. Millennian entered the world not in the shadow of grand palaces or sacred rituals, but under a willow's branches, amid a tempest that cleaved the heavens. His mother, the child of a healer, bundled him in simple cloth as lightning cracked across the ridges.
Flocks fled the sky. Rain swirled in wild patterns, and the infant made no wail. He hummed softly, a melody woven into his first breath. Music clung to him like a shadow. Rivers murmured tunes when he bent to sip from them. Foliage rustled in symphony as he wandered by. No teacher guided him. Harmony was his birthright. By 10, he could echo any bird's trill and blend it into verses. By 16, he coaxed the lyre with such finesse that battle-scarred soldiers halted, their hearts stirred by his strains. He wove lyrics of flowing streams, vanished kin, and meadows untouched by strife, ballads that drew unshed tears from even the stoic. Folks hailed him as a blessing, a wonder, a soul breathed by the gods. Millennian claimed nothing, wandering from hamlet to hamlet, offering his art without payment or boast. His melodies eased ailments, his harmonies melted rigid spirits. Once he strummed for a fading youth who, lulled by his serenade, slipped into eternal rest with a gentle grin, as if embracing a sweet vision.
But not every listener was of mortal flesh. One evening in spring, as Millennian perched by a sparkling brook, plucking a melody of celestial glow, the atmosphere shifted. The gusts hushed, the current calmed. Even the croaks of amphibians faded. Then they emerged, the Muses, 9 ethereal sisters, daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, stepping from the world's hidden seams, enveloped in radiance and resonance. Each embodied her domain: history, tragedy, dance, epic verse, and beyond. Their gazes were neither warm nor harsh, simply profound. They attended his song, then, to Millennian's awe, responded in unison. 9 voices intertwined in flawless accord, ancient as the cosmos itself. Millennian shut his eyes, instinctively merging his tone. It didn't mirror theirs, it elevated them. As the final chord dissolved into quiet, the constellations appeared nearer, drawn by the enchantment. Calliope, the eldest and most solemn, muse of epic poetry, pressed her finger to his forehead. "You are no common soul," she intoned. "You are a conduit." And so dawned the saga of Millennian, the minstrel whose strains would echo through the divine realms.
From that dusk onward, Millennian was no mere talent. He was anointed, branded, the subject of hushed lore. The Muses had selected him. In the secluded valleys of Mount Helicon, a haven few mortals ventured, they welcomed him into their hallowed ring. Amid timeless groves and skies free of human greed, Melanian absorbed wisdom not through words, but immersion. Calliope, guardian of epics, showed him how to shape tales into melody. Clio, keeper of history, murmured chronicles of empires into his dreams. Terpsichore, spirit of dance, twirled unshod through fallen leaves as he accompanied her, his hands mastering the cadence of breeze and motion. Euterpe placed her flute in his grasp and whispered, "Hear." And he did. He drank in not just notes, but essences, the truths nestled between syllables, the ones mortals overlooked, yet sensed. In the pause before thunder, in the pang of desire, in a child's wonder at fresh snow. The Muses bestowed not might, but insight. In exchange, they sought one favor: sing for them, for the mortals, the forsaken, the burdened, the arrogant and shattered, those yearning to recall that grace endured amid anguish, that melody could heal like salve or cut like a dagger.
At first, Melanian complied. He graced public squares and secluded meadows, performing for rulers and the destitute. His compositions mended fractured souls, ignited uprisings, reconciled parents and offspring, and forged fragile truces between foes. But as his ability flourished, another force bloomed: aspiration. He pursued tones beyond the Muses' lessons, chords untouched by immortals. In the deepest hush of midnight, he composed in solitude, piecing together shards of a creation transcending speech, a ballad to warp moments, hush gales, and evoke sorrow from rock, an ultimate opus. He confided in none, not even his mentors, for a fragment of his spirit no longer craved to echo the divine. He sought to eclipse it. The Muses, ever vigilant, perceived the shift, not in his playing, but in his glance, the way it wandered past them, as if fate promised him grandeur beyond acclaim. Far off, destiny quivered, for no human treads alongside the gods indefinitely without a price. Melanian retreated from the mortal realm. Melanian turned away from the world's clamor, the cheers of crowds, the gifts of rulers, the pleas of students. He severed ties with the Muses, their voices fading into silence. Whispers spread. Some said he was sick, others that he had perished. In truth, he had ventured deeper into the shadowed folds of Mount Helicon than any mortal dared, to a place where only echoes of ancient gods lingered. There, in a cavern where crystals hummed with light's touch, he began crafting his ultimate work, a song not born but unearthed, like a secret carved into the fabric of existence. The melody came in fragments, whispered in dreams, thundered in storms, or unveiled in silences so profound they chilled him. It refused to be pinned down, shifting with his breath, pulsing with his heartbeat. This was no performance piece. It was truth distilled into sound. Its opening note carried the birth of constellations, Its closing chords bore the weight of fallen empires. It was neither mournful nor exultant. It simply was. Melanian toiled for months, perhaps years, time warping within the cave's crystalline walls. He ate sparingly, slept only when the music permitted, laughing one moment, weeping the next, as the song wove through his soul like thread through a loom. When it was complete, the world paused. Birds froze mid-flight. Trees leaned toward a silent peak. Streams hushed their flow. The heavens themselves seemed to hold their breath. Far above, in Olympus's alabaster halls, the gods turned their gazes. The Fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, stilled their eternal weaving. Clotho murmured, "A thread quivers." Lachesis frowned, and Atropos, whose shears never faltered, set them aside. They listened. The song did not plead for reverence or love. It simply unveiled all that was. When its final note dissolved, the cavern refused to echo it, as if the world knew repeating it would be sacrilege. The gods waited, the muses waited. They expected Melanian to descend, to share this marvel with mortals. But he did not. He sealed the song within himself, guarding it like a sacred relic. In doing so, he set a different rhythm in motion, one of silence and consequence. When Melanian emerged from the cave, the world felt diminished. The skies, once boundless, paled against the melody still resonating in his bones. Villagers flocked to him, bards, poets, priests, begging to hear the work that had stirred the heavens. He offered only a faint smile. "Not yet," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. The muses saw the change. At dusk, they appeared, stepping from starlight like notes from a lyre, their robes shimmering with inspiration, their eyes sharp with warning. "You were chosen to bear beauty," Erato said, her tone laced with sorrow. "Not to bury it," Cleo added, her voice heavy. "Sing it," Calliope urged, her words a plea. Melanian lowered his gaze. "I will not see it diminished." The muses recoiled as if struck. "Do you deem mortals unworthy?" Terpsichore asked, her voice trembling. "Do you claim it as yours alone?" His eyes met theirs, not with anger, but with something colder. Possession. "Yes." Silence fell, sharp as winter's edge. "Then you are no longer ours," Calliope declared. "Not because you surpassed us, but because you hoard what was meant to be shared." They vanished, leaving only the weight of their words. The gods, too, waited. Zeus, pausing his storms. Hades, tilting his head in the underworld's depths. They yearned for a single note, a fleeting strain. None came. Melanian resumed performing lesser works, their beauty still enough to move crowds to tears, to stir hearts and halls. Yet he knew, and the divine knew, something was absent. The song that could sway the fates, still time, and touch the gods, remained locked within him, unwritten, unshared, unvoiced. He called it sacred, but sacred things, when sealed too long, begin to tarnish. He told himself he protected it, preserving its purity. But the Muses, watching from afar, saw the truth. He had bound the divine to his pride. The gods, who endured wars, worship, and chaos without flinching, do not tolerate theft. One night, the winds fell still, the stars dimmed, and a curse began to take root, not with flame or thunder, but with memory, heavy and unyielding, poised to claim what Millennium had dared to withhold. The curse arrived not with thunder or divine fury, but with the softness of a dream. Millennium lay beneath a star-strewn sky, cradled in the silence he once cherished. Sleep drew him into its depths, and there, waiting, was the final song, vivid, luminous, impossibly complete. Notes he had never shaped wove through harmonies he hadn't dared to dream. It carried him across constellations, plunged him into seas of sound, unraveled the essence of existence itself. He wept in rapture, in reverence, in surrender.
Then, with the dawn's first light, it vanished, not faded, but erased. No trace remained, no note, no rhythm, no echo of its name. At first, he dismissed it as a cruel jest of sleep. He seized his lyre, fingers fumbling to summon even a single phrase. The strings answered with discord, hollow and wrong. That night he returned to his bed, heart racing, and the song bloomed again, more radiant than before. In the dream he sang with it, tears streaming, his hands dancing through streams of light. It felt eternal, tangible. But with morning's breath it slipped away once more. Desperate, Millennium kept candles burning through the night, scratching frantic notes in the dark, pleading with his mind to hold a single chord, a fleeting image. Yet each sunrise stole it, leaving only emptiness. He ceased performing, shunned crowds. His home grew dim, dust settling over untouched tables, but none of it mattered. His sole obsession was to reclaim the song. The Muses watched from afar, their gazes heavy with grief. He was granted a gift, Euterpe murmured, and chose to imprison it. Now only he will hear it, Polyhymnia said softly, and never hold it, Clio added. This was no vengeance, it was balance, the divine order of Dike.
Millennium would hear the song each night for eternity, but it would live only in dreams, slipping through his grasp like water through a shattered vessel. He would chase it forever, hope curdling into madness. For what torments a bard more than knowing the greatest song he ever crafted sings beyond his reach? Millennium stopped counting the nights. They merged into a relentless cycle of bliss and despair. In dreams, the song enveloped him, whole and radiant, like a lover returning from exile. Each dawn he woke hollow, screaming, weeping into the void. He tried to outsmart the curse, hiring scribes to capture his murmured fragments, seeking oracles to pry memories from his mind, singing to his own reflection in hopes of trapping a note. Nothing held. Slowly, he unraveled, his frame withered, robes hanging loose on a body grown gaunt. His trembling hands could no longer cradle the lyre. Its strings snapped under his frantic strums, left unrepaired. In sleep, the music remained his refuge, the only place he felt whole. Waking became his punishment.
He cursed the dawn, shattered his windows, sealed himself in a chamber untouched by light. Yet the song fled with each morning's glow. When he emerged, he was no longer the bard who had moved kings to tears. His eyes burned wild, his voice, once golden, now a rasp from endless, desperate humming. He wandered from village to village, not for alms, but for memory. "Have you heard it?" he asked strangers, voice trembling. "The song without start or end. Do you hear it in your dreams?" At first, they pitied him, offering bread or shelter. Then fear took hold. Some hurled stones, others turned away. He sang disjointed fragments in marketplaces, bursts of melody that baffled listeners, but to him were clues, shards of a puzzle he could almost grasp. He laughed at each failure, then wept, then laughed again, teetering on the edge of reason. Each night the song returned, shimmering, eternal, just beyond his reach. The muses observed, not with wrath, but with sorrow. Once their finest conduit, Millennium was now a broken vessel, overflowing only in dreams when no one could hear.
His song, hoarded in pride, had become his undoing, not through fire or divine retribution, but through the weight of memory withheld. He no longer walked in the world of men, lost to a cycle of fleeting ecstasy and eternal loss, a bard undone by the very gift he sought to claim. Melon's body moved through the world, but his soul lingered elsewhere, trapped between the realms of dream and dawn, memory and loss. The song he could not hold haunted him, heard only in sleep, lost with each waking breath. He drifted barefoot through cities that once crowned him with laurels, now shunning his shadow. Children who once gathered at his feet fled from his gaunt silhouette. His name, once a melody of praise, became a cautionary whisper. Beware the fate of melanin. He slept where he fell, beneath gnarled trees, in abandoned shrines, or in the doorways of inns that had once vied for his song. He sought neither food nor shelter, only a place to dream, to chase the ghost of the music that defined him.
The curse was unrelenting. Each night, hope flickered as he slipped into sleep, and the final song returned whole, radiant, a divine specter. Each morning, it vanished, leaving only the torment of knowing it had been there. The cruelty lay not in silence, but in the memory of sound, knowing he had touched something transcendent, yet unable to grasp why. He spoke to shadows, to oaks, to constellations, pleading for a fragment of the melody. He sang to passers-by, demanding they echo his notes, convinced the song hid in another's voice. Once he trailed a child for miles, certain the boy's hum carried a trace of his lost creation. But it was ordinary, mundane, and Millennium collapsed in the dust, weeping for hours. Yet each night the song returned, taunting, embracing, eternal. In dreams he tried to hum it, to wake mid-chord, but the curse was cunning. It bound him within the dream, unable to write, to sing, to carry it beyond. Only in sleep did it live, and with dawn, only emptiness remained. Some claimed he hummed in his slumber, that if you leaned close at midnight, you could hear music unlike any other, a fleeting echo of the divine.
But it existed only in darkness, lost to the light. The muses no longer appeared. The gods turned their gazes away. Millennian, once the world's voice, now wandered as an echo of a song the world had forgotten, yet he could never escape. Millennian grew frail as dusk, his skin pale and translucent, stretched thin over bones worn by years of wandering. His voice, once a golden thread, rasped from endless whispers and cries. He no longer sought sustenance or refuge, nor even the song itself. He simply walked. One evening, he reached a cliff above the sea, where the world was quiet. No villages, no paths, no prying eyes. Just the wind's sigh, the waves' murmur, and stars kindling in the deepening sky. He curled against a weathered stone, the sea breeze weaving through his tangled hair. He did not weep or sing. He simply closed his eyes. The dream came, but it was different. No fog obscured it. No struggle delayed it. The final song was there, immediate and luminous, not just sound, but a realm of its own.
Millennian stood within it, barefoot on chords that swayed like reeds, stars pulsing in rhythm above a sky woven of harmony. The wind sang, the sea joined, and he was no longer merely hearing the song, he was part of it. His voice rose, steady and unbreaking, weaving into the melody. Every note he had mourned, every phrase he had lost, was there, not as his creation, but as something greater. He saw it now. The song had never been his to own. He was its witness, its vessel. In that final dream, there was no grief, no shame, only release. When dawn broke, Millennian did not stir. The breeze lifted gently around him, as if carrying his final breath to the sea. A shepherd found him, serene, hands folded over his chest, as if cradling an unseen lyre. No scroll marked his song, no record held its notes. Yet above, seabirds wheeled in strange patterns, as if dancing to a melody only they could hear. For a moment, the sea itself sang, not in words or tunes, but in a primal resonance, a sound Millennian had become.
He was laid to rest beneath a solitary olive tree near the cliff, a symbol of peace and endurance in the Greek world. No priests chanted rites, no crowds mourned. Only the shepherd and a handful of villagers, faintly recalling tales of the bard who once made the gods pause, stood witness. His grave was simple, but his legend lingered, carried by the wind, the waves, and the stars, an echo of a song that needed no voice to endure. No monument marked Millennian's passing, only silence. Yet silence has a way of carrying truths too vast for stone. In the years that followed, whispers spread across the land like ripples on a still lake. Travelers swore that beneath a new moon, near the cliff where Millennium last rested, a fleeting melody danced in the breeze, brief, heart-wrenching, achingly beautiful. Not a full song, but a single note, enough to halt a wanderer in their tracks. Children woke from dreams humming tunes they had never learned. Bards stirred at midnight, tears staining their faces with no memory of their sorrow's source.
Sometimes a lone musician at dusk, playing for no one, would strike a chord not their own, a perfect, fleeting strain that vanished by dawn. The muses spoke no more of Millennium. They did not curse another bard, nor seek to reclaim the song. They understood what he had become, not a caution, not a savior, but a legend born of refusal and redeemed through surrender. His punishment was not cruelty, but consequence. His redemption was not in sharing, but in becoming part of the song itself. The final song was never etched on parchment, never sung in grand amphitheaters or sacred groves. It lived instead in the spaces between sleep and waking, in the pause before a lyre's first note, in the sea's murmur when grief weighs heavy. Millennium's song wove itself into the world's fabric, not to be recalled, but to be felt, a whisper in the soul, a melody beyond words. Those who sensed it, even for a moment, carried its silence forever. They said if you stood alone on that cliff under the right stars, with no eyes watching and the wind gentle, you might catch a sound not of this earth, a fragment, a breath. And if you listened with your whole being, you might understand why Millennium held it so tightly, why he let it consume him.